Welcome to special coverage here on BBC News, across online, social and on the World Service, answering your questions about events in Gaza. Well, the breakthrough has happened. Agreement has finally been reached between Israel and Hamas on the first phase of a ceasefire plan for Gaza. With me to answer all of the questions you have sent in, Lyse Doucet is with us, Rushdi Abualouf and also Sumi Somaskanda. So let's get cracking straight away to the first question, and to Lyse first of all. It is difficult, Lyse, to exaggerate the significance of this moment, isn't it?
Matthew, we have lost count of how many times in almost 2 years we said the deal is closed, closer than ever before, almost done, only for Israelis and Palestinians and people the world over being disappointed when again Gaza descends into even greater war and the agony of the families of the Israeli hostages deepens. This took an extraordinary push, an unprecedented momentum, as we've been reporting, and it took the real focus by President Donald Trump for the first time, zeroing in on the need to end the war, to end the military operations, to bring the hostages home, and to start a process of looking at the future. This is a breakthrough, but there is still a big road ahead.
Let me bring Sumi in. And Sumi, just briefly give us the central planks of this agreement.
Yeah, Matthew, it's important to say, of course, when President Trump and the Israeli Prime Minister unveiled their 20-point framework for peace, that really was a roadmap, not only for the first phase of how these two sides would reach a ceasefire, but also for the next questions of governance in Gaza, for example. What has been reached is a ceasefire. This is the first phase, as has been said. And so what has been agreed is the release of the living and deceased hostages, although, as we've been reporting on air, it is unclear on the timing of when the deceased hostages, their remains would be released, because we understand that Hamas is also trying to locate the remains of those deceased. We also know that Israel has agreed to withdraw to a certain line. We understand from a spokesperson from negotiations that Israel would withdraw to about 53% of the territory in the Gaza Strip. And of course, and critically here, as we know that aid has been a big issue, getting aid into the Gaza Strip. Aid will now start to enter in the peace framework that Donald Trump had agreed with the Israeli Prime Minister. That was intended to be 600 trucks a day. We understand from spokespeople who took part in negotiations, initially it would be about 400 trucks of aid a day into Gaza to help alleviate the suffering and starvation that we've seen play out there over the last several months. But that would then be added, of course, as the situation, as the days go on. So that is the central plank of what has been agreed. But it's important to note this is a ceasefire plan, and the next steps still have to be negotiated. The questions of where Gaza goes from here, who will be governing in Gaza, and what type of force would be in Gaza.
Yes, and I've got so many questions on all of those areas, and also including aid, which you touched on. Rushdi, let me bring you in, because, of course, Lyse, referencing the hostages, how many hostages are still being held? How many are alive? And in terms of the numbers of Palestinians likely to be released, what is the likely number?
Well, they agreed on all of the life hostages, which we believe about 20 Israelis are held hostages in Gaza, in addition to, I think, 30, maybe more, in total 60 or 58 people, dead bodies. When it comes to the Palestinian prisoners, there is 250 Palestinians who are serving life sentence in prison, out of 290, the total number of people serving the same time in prison. And there is 1,700 Palestinians who were arrested after 7th of October. But Israel put a condition here that none of them were a part of the attack. So all of the people who were attacking Israel will not be, none of them will be released. So the people who were arrested from inside Gaza as part of the Israeli military operations in Gaza are about 5,000, according to a Palestinian official. And Israel would release 1,700 people, and all of them will be back home to Gaza. Most of the 250 people will be deported outside Gaza and West Bank to other countries. And we have seen this happen back in January during the first ceasefire.
Lyse, let me ask you a little more detail about aid, because Subsana sending a question about when the UN will actually provide aid. How much aid is likely to get in? Who will distribute it? Because, of course, the UN has been blocked over recent months. Where will it actually go?
Yeah, this is a big question, and everyone, most of all the Palestinians in Gaza, some of whom have been living on the brink of famine and children dying at a growing rate from hunger, are waiting for that aid to start flowing. I know from having been to the Egypt border, at least on the Egyptian side, thousands of trucks backed up with desperately needed humanitarian aid, not able to pass through the Israeli inspections to enter into Gaza. Every aid agency we've spoken to in the past few days said that they have a lot of aid in warehouses, either in Egypt or in Israel. There's some warehouses in the central part of the Gaza Strip in Deir al-Balah, which has become a sort of a humanitarian hub because of the Israeli advances and control in southern Gaza and the destruction in places like Rafah. So they are ready to roll. We don't have, I've asked everyone what are the details. There are a few details on how this humanitarian operation would proceed. But in recent weeks, there has been a bit more aid getting in, and Israel has allowed more room for the United Nations agencies and others working with them to distribute some of the aid alongside the controversial Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, described by aid agencies as a death trap. So many Palestinians have been killed in the rush and the chaos to grab on to some of that aid. So I think what we can expect is that hundreds of trucks, 400, Sumi said 400 initially. They hope even more if the ceasefire holds, will go rumbling across the border, as they did during that ceasefire of January to March. Hundreds and hundreds of trucks went across the borders every day. And that brings down the prices. It eliminates the black market. So there is real an improvement in life, in food aid, in access to supplies all round.
Sumi, Israel's foreign minister did an interview on Fox News saying that Israel has no desire to restart the war once the hostages are out. That, of course, is one of the big fears. A question from Niall: how can we trust Israel when they acted in bad faith previously and broke the previous ceasefire back in March?
That is a question that, of course, many are asking, but it's important to keep in mind what has changed is the circumstances since that first ceasefire, or that initial ceasefire when President Trump entered office, went into place and then fell apart. And we understand also from our colleagues at CBS News, and Lyse, of course, has been reporting this as well, that what seemed to change for President Trump and the Trump administration was indeed Israel's strike on Doha, targeting Hamas officials, and that appeared to really anger President Trump and members of his administration. And we have seen that President Trump, through much reporting here, we understand, had put more pressure on the Israeli prime minister to make some concessions to come to an agreement. We've seen through his social media posts, of course, that he has continued to put pressure on Hamas, threatening, obliteration, destruction if they don't agree. So those are some of the factors that have gotten to us to a point where President Trump and his administration believe they have put sufficient pressure on the Israelis as well as Hamas to ensure that this agreement holds. And I think the fact that the president, as we understand, is traveling to the region, again, our colleagues at CBS reporting that that would include Israel and Egypt, as we understand to this point, gives also more weight to the sense that they really see this as an agreement that not only will hold in this first ceasefire phase, but must hold in the next negotiations. Of course, the details of that will be very, very difficult, and it will take a lot of effort from the Trump administration and pressure continue down the line to ensure that it doesn't fall apart.
Rushdi, another potential big obstacle, of course, is that question about will Hamas disarm, and if they do, how?
Well, Hamas said it clearly today in a statement put by one of their senior leaders, that as long as the occupation exists, the weapon is legitimate. That's what he said, which give indication that Hamas is not willing to give up its arms. And we understand that their military commander in Gaza was sending a message to the political leadership that he is, under any circumstances, unwilling to leave Gaza or to leave his weapon there. So it is going to be very, very complicated issue. The issue of the weapon was discussed before with the Egyptian and the Qataris, and Egypt offered Hamas many times to have the weapon in some storage under Egyptian and Arab observation, which I don't think Hamas at that time liked this idea. They believe that the weapon should exist as long as the occupation exists, and they can only negotiate it if there is a Palestinian state, which doesn't look like we are going to have any achievement to create a Palestinian state very soon. So this is one of the main obstacles, main issue for that they are leaving it to the next stage.
Yes.
What is Hamas also fear the most is that Israel won't go to the next stage, and we have seen in their statements twice today mentioning that a guarantee has to be there from the Americans.
Lyse, a twin question, one from Jack and one from me. Jack asks, how will the deal be enforced? And actually, who will govern Gaza in the coming months?
Well, it is a big question. As Rushdi has spoken to, that deals in the past have broken down. Many are asking, well, will Israel return to its military operations as it did during the ceasefire earlier this year? I spoke a short time ago to Qatar's chief spokesperson, Dr. Majid Al-Ansari, and asked him about this. And there is a feeling now that there is a momentum pushed by President Trump's new focus on ensuring that this war does not start. He already threatened, he was already asked that before the deal was done, what happens if Israel does return to war? And he said, well, I have ways of exerting pressure and I will use that pressure. And so they are hoping that the momentum will gather, but there's no denying that there are risks in this proposal. As to who governs Gaza, in the Hamas statement, they said they agreed with the point in one of the 20 points in President Trump's plan that Gaza will initially be run by technocrats with no political affiliation. They will need experts. Gaza lies in utter ruin. That more than 90% of it is simply rubble. There's no schools for children to go to. The health facilities lie in ruin. Just the basics of life do not exist. And so it's going to be a Herculean task. They've got to move in the bulldozers, move in the supplies, get the resources. And let's emphasize this, that the wealthy Gulf states who have built and rebuilt Gaza time and again have said they're not going to put money in yet again if they think that Gaza will again be attacked and will be destroyed again. So they need guarantees. If Israel, if the world wants that, what will be billions to go into Gaza,
yes,
they have to give guarantees that this time it will work.
Rushdi, quite a few questions on this particular topic, and it's a really simple question. Will Palestinians be able to return to their homes in the north?
Yes, as soon as Israel withdrawn from the Rashid Road or the Coastal Road, you know there is two roads that linking Gaza from north to south. There is Salah ad-Din Road, which is the bigger one and more appropriate for people to use, but it's closed, and it's part of the new deal. It will remain closed because Israel is having active operation in the area. So the only road that is open, the road that people use to flee, like 3 weeks ago from Gaza City, where about 700 people fled the fight. And this is the only road for the people to go back. Today, the people tried, because the initial news was that the ceasefire would go into effect at 12. So they started to go back when the Israelis stopped them. The Israeli tank shield stopped them. So this is the only way to go back. But given the scale of destruction in the north, even when back in January, many of the people went back, or hundreds of thousands went back, they found their homes are not standing anymore. And since then, maybe thousands or tens of thousands of homes, additional homes, were destroyed. But we have seen people prefer to stay in their neighborhood, the places where they belong. And most of them, they try to repair one room out of a building, or setting up a makeshift house or a tent over the rubble of their buildings, but people insisted they want to have their right to return to their neighborhoods.
Sumi, let me ask you a question about the Nobel Peace Prize, because Marlon has questioned the timing of this deal with that announcement from Nobel and the committee that is coming tomorrow. And of course, Donald Trump has been really open about saying he wants a Nobel Peace Prize for his work here and elsewhere, saying it would be an insult if he didn't get it. So give me a thought, your analysis on the timing of all of that within this equation.
Yeah, well, as you said, Matthew, he's made no secret about the fact that he believes he should receive this prize. Of course, we know, as it's being announced on Friday, the nominations for this year's prize were closed in January. So President Trump will not be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize on Friday. But there is speculation that President Trump is thinking about next year's nomination, of course, and wants to receive this prize. And we know world leaders have said they would nominate him for it. And in fact, President Zelensky of Ukraine saying today that if Donald Trump could broker a ceasefire for the war in his country, that he would also nominate President Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. As for the timing, yes, of course, timed around this week where the Peace Prize is being awarded. But of course, we have to remember that just 2 days ago, it was the anniversary of the October 7th attack. And Donald Trump, he, of course, understands that symbolism, what these dates mean, and wanted to be able to say in this week in particular, sending his negotiators to Egypt to take part and saying basically that this deal has to get done this week in the coming days, that this was a big part of it for him. But as for the Nobel Peace Prize this year, it is something, of course, that Donald Trump has said, oh, they're going to give it to somebody else, but it should be me. Let's see what the decision is next year. He would see this as a prize he absolutely should win if the ceasefire agreement holds.
We've only got 5 minutes left, so let's whiz through because still lots of questions to get through. Lyse, I'll ask you a twin question. Is there a danger that Benjamin Netanyahu's government is torpedoed by the far right who've held his coalition together? And a question from Asan saying, what happens to the various arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and others?
Two very different questions. First of all, it's a minority view, the far-right ministers who have made it clear they will oppose this deal. Other members of the cabinet, opposition figures, have made it clear they will provide a safety net for Prime Minister Netanyahu should his government collapse. No one wants to say no to President Trump. On those arrest warrants, well, Prime Minister Netanyahu found a way to fly to the United States to meet President Trump. There are ways for him to get around it, but certainly that is a dark cloud that hangs over his head.
Sumi, a question to you. How realistic is the prospect of a two-state solution that we often hear that phrase coming out of a variety of capitals?
Well, it's certainly part of the 20-point peace framework that President Trump had unveiled a week and a half ago, certainly a pathway to a Palestinian state. But the reality here is that if you listen to what President Trump has said and many members of his cabinet and indeed his ambassador to Israel, it hasn't been a priority for this administration. And it is hard to imagine that this administration will make a massive push for that to be addressed in the coming weeks. At the same time, we know that the U.S.'s allies have, during the UN General Assembly in New York, recognized a Palestinian state. President Trump and his administration criticized that heavily. From the U.S. perspective, it appears that this administration has moved further away from that two-state solution than any administration previous. And so in that sense, the pressure that President Trump would put on the Israelis to back down from the prime minister's position that he stated, that there cannot be a Palestinian state, would be reward to Hamas, that might not be as heavy as the pressure put on to reach a ceasefire.
Rushdi, a quick one, because in terms of the wider region, the last 2 years, it has changed everything, hasn't it? Not just Gaza, Lebanon, Iran, Syria.
Yes, and we have seen Hamas in the statement thanking Lebanon for its supporting of Gaza. Especially, we have seen the Hamas official website, military website, was putting a picture for Mr. Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah. He was assassinated by Israel, saying that, thank you, you have not forgotten Gaza. We have seen all the time Hamas appreciating the attacks from Yemen. They still appreciate Iran and thank Iran for all of its effort to support Gaza. But since October the 7th until now, if we have seen what Israel have done in all of the regions like Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Gaza, West Bank, and Iran, it is changing, I think, the region to a way it gives more positive, like more left-right people or more good people chances, like we have seen United Arab Emirates, Saudi,
Yes.
the Egyptian, the Muslims, Turkey, Qatar, all of them were joining the effort to achieve this moment. This could not be happening if all of the regime, the Syrian regime, Hezbollah, and the pressure from
Yes.
Iran would have been exist in the same way.
A final question to you all, 30 seconds if you could, because we are seeing optimism finally after months and years of really a desperate situation, but there are multiple dangers ahead, aren't there? Rushdi, to you first of all.
Yes, of course, and everyone in Gaza said that our sense of joy is mixed with fear because they have seen in the past a day where all of their life was a change again after like 60 days of calm back from January to March, and this is what the people in Gaza are fear the most. They express this in their social media account. They keep saying about it that we need a trust. We need to be able to trust that the war is over.
Sumi.
Absolutely. And President Trump, as I said earlier, and his administration will continue to have to engage with all sides and all parties here to ensure that this agreement goes forward. But there is a great sense of relief and, honestly, for the Trump administration, accomplishment that this ceasefire agreement was agreed in the first place.
A final word from Lyse, from you.
The only way this is going to work is that if the world keeps its eye on this process. All of the mediators, most of all President Donald Trump, cannot look away. Otherwise, it could fall apart.
Well, thank you. And we have run out of time. Thanks for joining us on this BBC News special across online, TV and radio. Thanks to Lyse, to Rushdi and Sumi, and thanks to all of you for sending in all of your questions. I hope we got to your questions. I know that some were left unasked, but thanks for joining us here on BBC News. Bye for now.